Hey guys, I'm sorry that there's been a slight delay in this video. It's been a really hectic 2 weeks. I've had quite a lot of work on. I haven't been feeling too good. Anxiety's been pretty bad recently. But I haven't forgotten you, and I thought it would be great to come back with the next instalment of The Stealers of Dreams, which is what I started about a month ago. I read the prologue, so I thought I could read chapter 1, and hopefully you'll continue to enjoy the madness that is Doctor Who. So, thanks for tuning in, and here we go. Chapter 1. Chips had been a mistake. Rose blamed the Doctor. He was used to all this travelling lark. Other worlds, other times. He ought to have tipped her the wink, explained to her that chips here weren't chip potatoes, but chip something or other else. Some local vegetable, a bit too soft, a bit too blue, with an oily texture and a peppery aftertaste. As she pushed her plate aside, though, she felt a familiar tingle. Sometimes it took just that sort of incidental detail to remind her how far she was from home. That she was breathing the air of the future, the air of another world. Another world! Rose still found it hard to take in, as if it was too much for her mind to process all at once, and it would only let her focus on one thing at a time. It didn't help that this particular world was so human, so mundane. Crowded pavements littered with discarded wrappers, streets clogged with traffic, and the buildings. Almost without exception, they were concrete towers, devoid of character and no more than boxes to hold people. Like the ones on the estate back home, thought Rose, built before she was born. How disappointing. It could have almost been London, or any big American city. Peering through the grease-streaked window beside their table, she eyed a line of cars simmering resentfully at a nearby junction. She would hardly have been surprised to see a big red bus turning that corner. Look at the detail, she thought. Like the menu, no thicker than a normal piece of cardboard, and yet it projected life-size aromograms of its featured dishes. And the way the cars floated over the roadway on air jets, churning the gravel beneath them, and the TV screens as flat as posters, seemingly attached to every available surface. That had been her first impression of this place. Newsreaders looking down at her from the sides of every building, their words subtitled so as not to be lost in the ever-present traffic rumble. There were 2 screens in the cafe itself, one behind Rose and one on the wall in front. She kept finding her eyes drawn to the second one over Captain Jack's shoulder. Mr. Anton Ryland, the 6th of Sector 44 Kappa Zero, was celebrating today after a well-earned promotion. Mr. Ryland, who has worked for the Office of Statistical Processing for 37 years, is now a Senior Analytical Officer, Blue Grade. Commenting on his rapid rise, Mr. Ryland said, "It means I earn an additional 2.4 credits per day before tax and my parking space." The Doctor had been attacking his food with the same gusto with which he tackled Autons and Slitheen and other alien menaces. As he glanced up between forkfuls, though, his eyes followed Rose's gaze and his lips pulled into a grimace. "Yeah, I know," he said. "Not exactly man bites dog, is it? You want those chips?" "Suits me to have a bit downtime," said Jack nonchalantly, biting into his burger, and Rose didn't even want to think about what manner of alien creature that might have come from. Those chips had opened up one hell of a mental can of worms. Jack hadn't known the Doctor for as long as she had, but the lifestyle was nothing new to him. Born in the 51st century, allegedly, he claimed to have spent his life in the space lanes, even travelled in time. Of course, you couldn't always believe a word Jack said. "Wouldn't want to live here, though," he continued in his American drawl. "This must be the most boring planet in the universe." "Do you mind?" said the Doctor. "I don't do boring. There's something new and exciting to find in every world if you look for it." "You know," Rose teased, "I thought it was only in naff old films that people of the future wore those one-piece jumpsuits." "Yeah, I figure that's why they've been giving us the eye," said Jack. "Our gear." The Doctor frowned. "They have?" "A few of them, discreetly. They must think we're pretty eccentric." "A while since I've been called that," said the Doctor. "Hey, maybe there's a few credits to be made here. What do you say, Rose? Start this world's first fashion house? You design 'em, I'll flog 'em." "This is Rose's future," the Doctor reminded Jack. "I doubt she could show these people anything they haven't seen before at some point of their history." "So the car mechanic look is what?" said Rose. "A fashion statement?" I'm more bothered about the time, said the doctor. I make it just gone... He did his usual joke of glancing at his wristwatch. At least, Rose assumed it was a joke. 2,775. But the tech here is still stuck in the 27th century. Earlier. He sniffed the air thoughtfully. And? Jack prompted. And that usually means trouble, said Rose, relishing a chance to show off her experience. It means someone or something is holding back progress, right, Doctor? Maybe. You don't think it's odd that these people escaped Earth, found their brave new world, and all they've done is copy what's left behind? He gave her no time to answer. How long do you think the city has been here? Long enough for the dirt to be ground in? Long enough to be bursting at the seams? But what have any of them done about it? He raised his voice as he went on, as if personally accusing everyone at the neighbouring tables. Rose leaned forward and spoke quietly, hoping to regain some measure of privacy. They are building, though. We saw builders on the way in. Remember? They used those floating disc things instead of scaffolding. On car parks and squares, the doctor waved a dismissive hand, and I doubt there's a blade of grass left in this city. He's right, said Jack. They're bulldozing skyscrapers to replace them with bigger ones. Building upwards, not outwards. How much of this world did the TARDIS say was jungle, Doctor? Over 90% of its landmass, but we saw no sign of construction at the edge of the city as we came in. The settlers must have cleared an area when they got here. But they haven't expanded since then, realised Rose. They're just trying to squeeze more people into the same space. I think it's time we found a few things out about this place. Its name, for a start. The doctor twisted in his seat and spotted a middle-aged woman leaving the table behind him. She had just swiped a plastic card through some sort of reader and was fumbling to replace it on her hip pouch as she headed for the door. You look as if you could settle a bet for us, he said. This planet, what's it called? Rose made a show of wincing and covering her eyes. Jack just grinned. The woman was flustered. What is this? You trying to trick me? She looked around suspiciously, as if expecting to see a camera. Peering between her fingers, Rose saw the disapproving looks and despairing headshakes of the cafe's other customers. This is Colony World 4378976.Delta 4, said the woman. I know it by no other name, and I'm sure I don't know what you're suggesting. Good day to you. She barged past the doctor and bustled out onto the street without a backward glance. You see, said the doctor triumphantly. Scratch the surface, and there's usually something going on underneath. Fantastic. He seized a handful of Rose's chips and stuffed them into his mouth. Then, catching her raised eyebrow stare, he glanced down and mumbled, Oh, let them look. We're the most interesting people in this room. You're mental, you are, laughed Rose. Excuse me, gentlemen, lady, I'm afraid I must ask you to leave. A man had appeared at the doctor's elbow. He was short and stocky, his jumpsuit white instead of the usual grey. He held his head at a tilt and looked down his nose at them. Your appearance and behaviour are, confusing my other patrons. Confusing them? The doctor leapt on the words. Rose didn't know whether to be angry or amused. We weren't disturbing anyone. You mean to say you're kicking us out for dressing a little differently, said Jack. Listen, mate, this is hardly the Savoy. Go now, said the white-clad man sniffily, and I might overlook the fact that you were all heard lying on these premises. It's all right, said the doctor quickly, leaping to his feet. Tell me you're off anyway. And you were right about the chips, Rose. They're rubbish. The man cleared his throat meaningfully. There is the matter of your bill, sir. The doctor patted down the pockets of his battered leather jacket, then shared an abashed look with his two friends. Meanwhile, the voice of the television newsreader boomed at them from either side. Mrs. Helen Flanagan is the luckiest woman in Sector 1 Beta this evening. Usually, when a 31-year-old schoolteacher drives home from work in her 7-year-old 1.5G injection Mark 14.B family vehicle, the journey takes her on average of 42.5 minutes. Tonight, though, she made it in half that time. The reason? Every one of the traffic lights in her route showed green. Earlier, we had asked Miss Flanagan what did she do with the time she had saved. She spent it watching TV. There were more flat screens in the foyers of every hotel they visited. When they finally found a room, I've got one on the top floor, the surly receptionist grunted, and the lady will have to share with you. There was one in there too, already parading its images before nobody. Rose flopped down onto the single bed and flicked through channels with the remote control, finding news bulletins, something that could be a drama. Half a dozen 20-somethings were lounging around on sofas talking about themselves. Reality show, said the doctor. At the cafe, he produced his psychic paper and ran it through the card reader on their table. It hadn't worked, of course, but the manager had been easily persuaded that the credit card was real, just a little dog-eared. He'd copied imaginary details onto a datapad and seen his unwanted customers out. The paper had done the trick again at the hotel reception. Rose had pointed out that technically this was stealing, but the doctor had just shrugged. Least they can do. I'm about to save the world. Probably. The receptionist had scooped 3 small white tablets into a tube and slapped it down in front of them with a dour expression. To stop you dreaming, he had said when questioned. The doctor had tried to refuse, but the receptionist grunted, Up to you whether you take 'em or not, but I've got to provide 'em. The room was cramped, its carpets worn and its wallpaper peeling. The bathroom was down the hall somewhere, shared with 6 more rooms. Rose would rather have slept in the TARDIS, but none of them had fancied another slog through the jungle back to where they'd left it. Especially not in the dark. Night had drawn in before they'd known it, the ever-present lights of the TV screens fooling their body clocks. What from? Asked Jack now. You said you were going to save this world. What from? From its people, said the doctor. Can't you smell it? Fossil fuels. They're burning fossil fuels. Not in any great quantities, not yet. But if this society is in regression, as it appears to be... Fossil fuels, echoed Jack. You're yanking my chain. Not about this. It's not right. This wasn't the deal. By the time your race had mastered space travel, you're supposed to have the technology and the maturity not to repeat your mistakes. You've no right to destroy another world. There was a long, awkward silence then. For something to do, Rose surfed the TV channels, filling the air with snatches of information. A man's car had stalled in his garage, making him 10 minutes late for work. A teenager had found a 1 microcred note in the street and taking it to the police station. A woman had accused her young neighbour of playing unapproved music, but the girl had retaliated with a more serious charge that the complainant was imagining things, and both were now under medical observation. What is it with this place? Said Jack. It's like they're obsessed with knowing every detail of each other's lives. Nothing wrong with showing an interest, the doctor muttered. I'm more interested in what we're not seeing. It's all news and documentary, said Rose. They've got like 30 TV channels. You'd think I'd found a soap or something by now. A sitcom, said the doctor, or a cop show. Or one of those hospital dramas you seem all so morbidly fond of. No, hang on. A new image had appeared. A group of uniformed men and women on a spacious futuristic set. And it was a set. Rose could tell as much without quite knowing how. Something about how it was all laid out, or lit, the camera angles, or perhaps the way the uniforms delivered their lines so clearly and confidently. On the screen, a klaxon alarm sounded, and the angle changed to show a star field through a curved portal. 2 ships dropped into view, all lightly brown and hard angles, though Rose thought they looked a bit too flat to be real. It's still got science fiction then, she noted. Historical reconstruction, said the doctor. Rose shot Jack a withering look, which wiped the smirk from his face. On the screen, the uniforms had contacted the occupants of the brown craft and were opening trade negotiations. The alarm had been stilled. Boring, thought Rose. You can see the pattern though, can't you? The doctor took the remote and zapped through the channels again, hunkering down in front of the screen as if it were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. News, documentaries, news, makeover shows, news, all factual programs. There's no escapism, no imagination, nothing tells a story. No lies, realised Jack. No fiction. Rose couldn't sleep. It wasn't the unfamiliar surroundings. She was used to that by now. And the blokes had let her have the bed after she'd vetoed Jack's first suggestion that they all share. Jack was squashed uncomfortably between the arms of a battered sofa, snoring away, while the doctor sat in a chair by the window, thinking. He didn't seem to have moved a muscle in hours. Every so often Rose looked over and saw him, chin in his arms, his arm resting on the chair back. There was a TV screen outside, playing a light show across his grim set face. More than once she thought he must have nodded off, until she saw the glint of an alert eye. The traffic was still heavy down below, the humming of engines and the blare of an occasional frustrated horn acquiring an air of unreality with 60 stories distance. And the doctor's words were going round in her head. Okay, Rosa said with a shrug. So they don't like fiction. Does it matter? Of course it matters, of course it does. Fiction is about possibilities, it's about hopes and dreams and, fears. Take those things away and what's left? A population of drudges, working, eating, sleeping, watching telly, unable to visualise anything outside of the confines of their own dreary lives. He had almost seemed personally affronted. "No wonder this world has stagnated," he had growled. "If you can't conceive of something better, something bigger, how can you build it?" "So what do we do?" Jack had asked, tongue-in-cheek. "Overthrow the government and introduce story time to the masses?" "Don't see why not. Do you think it's fair that the people of this world, this human world, have never experienced the work of Charles Dickens?" "He's a bit of a Dickens nerd," Rose had confided in an aside to Jack. Somewhere there were sirens, undulating in tone. A blue light flickered in the window, draining the colours from the screens out there. And if she concentrated hard, she could make out voices shouting above the traffic. Rose realised with a start that she had dozed off. She turned to where she had last seen the doctor, but his chair was empty. There were footsteps in the corridor outside the door. Running. Thanks for listening, and in another month, I guess, we'll be reading chapters 2. So thanks for tuning in, and have a good evening.